read the bio.
Well, is there anyone we're waiting on before we click record? Like anyone in particular, special guests, anything anybody's waiting on? It made sense in my mind.
Okay.
We usually ask this.
It's fine.
Okay.
I'm going to start. So, Sarah A. Chavez, a mestiza born and raised in the California Central Valley, is the author of poetry collection Hands That Break and Scar by Sundress Publications 2017 and All Day Talking, Dancing Girl Press 2014. Her new project, Halfbreed Helene Navigates the Whole, received a 2019-2020 Tacoma Artists Initiative Award. Chavez teaches creative writing in Latinx Chicanx-focused courses at the University of Washington Tacoma, serves as the poetry coordinator for the Best of the Net Anthology, and is a proud member of the Macondo Writers Workshop. Recent work can be found or is forthcoming in Xicanx, Mexican-American Writers of the 21st Century, Diode, and Hotel Amerika. Okay, let me...
And also to our readers, if there are any links you want to share in the chat to, get people to your social media or your website, please don't hesitate. Or of course your books, like to buy them. Please drop those links. So.
Okay, but thank you. And now we are going to go ahead and start with Sarah. Thank you very much, Sarah. Yay!
Hi, yay! Thanks for being here, everybody. And I'm so happy to be reading with Miguel. We missed each other at AWP, and so even this I'll take even this virtual being together. So thank you also, Alan and Christy, for having us and for putting on this lovely summer series. It's been fun to watch the ones that I've been able to make, and I'm excited to be part of the ones you invited me to. So. I have a fancy microphone. I just want to say thanks to Daniel Lewis, who is a much more prepared person than I am. He is this for his online teaching, whereas I'm just shouting at my laptop. so hopefully everyone can hear me. Probably much clearer. So I'm going to read 2 poems from my new series, Halfbreed Helene. It's the tentative title for the manuscript is Halfbreed Helene Navigates the Whole. And then Christy very sweetly asked if I would read, I got a request. So I'll read also a couple Dear Carol poems, one from my first chapbook. So, whoops, that was weird. Okay, I'll start. Halfbreed Helene knows, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that she is not adopted. Like her cousin said she was, not part of this family, at least, prima. But Helene has looked into the faces of her white family and her Mexican familia, and peering into the mirror, she cannot deny what stares back. Her abuelo's Spaniard eyes, her second primo's Mediterranean skin tones, her bisabuela's indigenous earlobes, her uncle's Irish dough belly, her dad's laborer hands, and the shortness inherited from both the Irish and Mexican sides. If a person ever carried the weight and wear of colonialism, it was Helene. At least this is what Helene supposes, her every choice in life some accidental homage to every hereditary cultural loss at the hands of Europeans, especially in diet. Her frijoles from a can, tortillas made of processed flour, her bumper fry with black beans and vegetarian sausage. If the outcome of every person is half nature and half nurture, food being a significant part of that nurture, and you truly are what you eat, H figures she is both garbage American and pocha extraordinaire. The true amalgamation, the epitome of what the fuckness, being the after-school hot dogs she remembers eating on the regular, Flour tortilla flat on the counter, 2 slices of American cheese, a healthy squiggle, like in the commercial, of yellow mustard, cold hot dog, roll it, pop it in the microwave for 30 long seconds while the comal heats up. After the beep beep, dry seal the seam on the stovetop, cut in half on a plastic plate, consume in front of the TV. So many hot dogs, so much plastic, so little Helene. Half-breed Helene loves living in the land of unicorns. Even though when she was a kid, they went because it was cheap, $5 for an adult, 2 kids in the back seat, and 4 in the station wagon trunk under a blanket tucked between grocery bags. Drive-in movies always felt romantic to Helene, magical. They'd get a 10-piece bucket meal from KFC and sit on the cigarette littered gravel, licking gravy off grubby fingers, wiping grease on pajama pants, digging their tenny-clad feet into the dirt. Somehow, wearing outside shoes with inside clothes made H feel mischievous, like she'd discovered a secret about a better way the world could work. Even as an adult going alone, it felt marvelous to be in public, clad in Nightmare Before Christmas flannel pajama pants, jacket hooded sweatshirt, and lace-up Vans. Like going out to throw the trash in the evening and not stopping walking at the end of the driveway. H pulls into a spot right in the middle lane, middle row, halfway between the screen and the bathroom, halfway from the fence and the exit. She does not eat KFC anymore, but has 3 bottles of Negra Modelo, kale salad, and a thick slice of chocolate cake from the corner bakery by her apartment. Sleeping headlights facing backwards, sitting on the screen-facing trunk, H chews the tough kale, sesame seeds lodging in the cavity on her back molar when 2 children in unicorn onesies, hoods up, plush horns, pointed true north gallop by. Nay, the unicorn children say, kicking up gravel, shaking their rainbow manes. Nay! They circle in the dip between rows to the left side of her car before galloping away, cigarette smoke and dust cloud in their wake. H goes back to her salad, opens the first beer, and drinks long, feeling the softness of late summer air, the coolness that begins once the sun rests. Nay, nay, nay! She heard again. Nay, the animal cries louder this time, fuller. 5 unicorns subtly prance around from the right side of the car this time. The 2 rainbow manes joined by a white speckled in glitter, 1 pink fur with a purple mohawk, and a classic black with a ribbon braided into the soft-looking gold hair. All horns pointing with purpose. They rear their knees, ked hooves in unison, circling between each car and the rows around adults, attaching transmitters to antennae, when 2 other children neigh from behind. Another white unicorn with a horn protruding from a tuft of silver bangs, and a brown horse kid with a paper towel roll cut to a point, stitched loosely to the top of the hood. The cardboard horn flopped precariously as the runtish child clopped excitedly toward the roving herd. When the team saw the 2 newcomers, they stopped their galloping, allowing the joining children to catch up. The rollicorn's fur looked like a mud clot among the spectral of pristine unicorns. They sniffed each other and circled, more like dogs than horses, The anxiety of difference seemed to Helene to shine off the human face framed by the matted brown mane. The original unicorns trot in place, snort in anticipation. One, seemingly the leader, reached out their hoof hand to touch the brown fur, and then the point of the paper towel roll horn. The cheeks of the brown rollicorn burned pink in the dusk glow until the lead unicorn dips its head and gestured horn to horn, a gentle clinking of horns, so as to touch but not rock loose the stitching, a recognition, a quiet acceptance. Everyone was properly sniffed. The team of unicorns began their neighing and clumping anew, a diverse little gang of mythical horses riding together off in the sunset. So those are the two Halfbreed Helene poems. Thank you. I misremember which poem Christy wanted me to read. And it's, but then I remembered later because I read the one I thought it was, and then I was like, oh, that does not say the phrase that she mentioned when we were chatting. So it's a little on the longer side, and I don't want to go over. So I will just read this poem. This is from my chapbook that feels like a million years ago, even it really wasn't. So it is for those who, well, anyone who didn't go to grad school with me, I guess. It's a chapbook that is my first collection, and it's a collection of epistles from a speaker to her dead loved one, Carol. And all the poems start with Dear Carol. This one's a sectional. 1. Dear Carol, you never told me silence could be so satisfying. The other day, I almost told another stranger to fuck off. It took all I had to only look through the filmy windshield of her boxy Fiat and lock eyes with her. She pretended not to see me on the crosswalk as she Callie rolled 6 inches from my legs. I arrest you with my gaze, I said in my head, as she gave a half smile and shrugged like, what can a girl do? But I kept my gaze steady until I put one foot on the sidewalk, then looked away, releasing her. 2. You did tell me words were dangerous, not words themselves, mind you, signifier and signified and all that shit, not that you or I knew any of that then, but you knew the words themselves meant nothing until they reached the ears of another person. Then watch out. Like the time we were walking home from 6-Star Factory Outlet, and that guy leaned his balding head out the window to whistle, and I told him he could shove that whistle up his ass. He chased us across the parking lot in his beat-up Bonneville until we got to a chain-linked fence with a hole. I shimmied up that motherfucker while you tried to squeeze through, and damn, did you get stuck. I laughed, and it was the power of that laugh that freed you. Laughter is so much stronger than crying. I couldn't believe the way your round ass got stuck, the ragged chain links clawing at your curvy hips, catching at the button on your jeans. Like Winnie the Pooh at rabbits, I kept saying. It didn't hurt when you slapped me in the arm the next day, but I stopped repeating it anyhow. I knew for your lazy ass to put down your cigarette and attempt to inflict harm, it must have actually bothered you. 3. Today, I counted the number of people taking the bus because they had to, versus the keen-wearing granola types trying to reduce their carbon footprint. I wish you lived long enough to take the bus to save Mother Earth. Not that you would have. You'd probably drive a Cadillac that twinkled pink in the sun with hypnotic hubcaps. I'd probably be ashamed to know you. I'd stand at the bus stop next to some hipster with a fixie and one of those BPA-free stainless steel water bottles, and we'd see your caddy speeding down Blackstone, and that hipster say, "What kind of a woman drives a car like that?" I'd nod. Some kind of new money pimp? But you just like to be surrounded by beautiful things. At least that's what you'd say while tucking a stray hair behind my ear with your fleshy white fingers. Beautiful things. I would giggle if you were in front of me now. I'm a feminist, I'd respond in my present college-educated mind. I'd cross my arms under my chest to underline my seriousness, all the while still feeling the heat of your touch against my ear. Thank you. And that's it.
Thank you. Wow. Great. Okay. So yeah, we'll save the questions for after the reading. But let me read the author bio for Miguel. Miguel M. Morales grew up in Texas working as a migrant seasonal farm worker. He is a Lambda Literary Fellow and an alum of VONA, Voices in Macondo Writers Workshops. Miguel's work that centers on fatness and queerness appear in From Macho to Mariposa, New Gay Latino Fiction, Hibernation, and other poems by Bear Bards. Immanent, I'm sorry, Miguel.
Imani.
Poets writing in the Anzaldúan Borderlands, and The Other F Word, a celebration of the fat and fierce. He is the co-editor of Pulso, in Remembrance of Orlando, and of Fat and Queer, an anthology of queer and trans bodies and lives. Okay, and yay, let me spotlight Miguel here.
Okay.
And take it away, Miguel. Thank you very much.
Hello. I'm going to read two pieces that are relatively new. One of them I just wrote this morning at work. So I'm trying to find like the speaking rhythm of them, because you have a poem and you know how it sounds in your head, which is different than the speaking rhythm. So bear with me if I stumble. The first one is called "I Wear Two Masks." I wear two masks when I leave my house. When I answer the door, when I check the mail, throw the trash, people look at me strange for wearing two masks, but the truth is, I've worn them for years. I wore a bandana as a mask when I worked in the fields, to protect my face from the burning sun, to protect myself from the toxic rain, from a crop duster that flew over, spraying us with chemicals. I wore a mask when I helped my mother clean houses after we left the field, when my 13-year-old hands scrubbed toilets, showers, and baseboards. I wore a mask when I worked construction to protect me from inhaling fiberglass insulation. I wore a mask in the explosive factory when we assembled charges for oil rigs, where gunpowder stained our masks, our eyes, and our skin, where we changed our clothes before leaving and starting our cars. I wore the types of masks to make me brave and keep me safe against racism, against homophobia, and all of the violence that always follows. I wore a docile mask when working retail to let white people know I was a good minority, that they could trust me with their money and trust me to serve them. I wore a mask during the AIDS crisis. I finally learned to create and wear a mask of my own, a warrior's mask of rage, to fight for my dying brothers and sisters who battled the government and a virus. I still wear masks of depression, of shame, of loneliness. These days, those masks are easier to reach for than a mask of patience, of empathy, of self-care. Often I wear one of each whenever I leave the house or not. So yes, I wear 2 masks, but the truth is, I've worn them for years. The next piece is called Legacy, which will be in the upcoming Fat and Queer Anthology. That should be out in May of 2021. It's called Legacy. And now in this pandemic, in this fight for Black lives, remember that our fat and queer and fat and trans bodies were not being ignored or fetishized, have always fought oppression. They've served as barricades, shields, ladders, message boards, and transportation. Our fat bodies stood on the lines at Stonewall, crossed the bridge in Selma, went on strike in the agricultural fields and meatpacking plant, defended sacred water at Standing Rock, protected the environment, and advocated for our animal friends. Our queer bodies knocked on doors, made phone calls, passed out flyers, registered people to vote, drove people to the polls, and defended the right to vote. Our trans bodies chained themselves to the White House fence during the AIDS crisis, committed and were arrested for acts of civil disobedience. Our fat and queer and fat and trans bodies have been abused, assaulted, beaten, bloodied, stabbed, and shot. Our bodies have been refused housing, treatment, legality, entry into classrooms and workplaces, airlines, and places of worship. We've marched on Washington for LGBTQ rights as part of the Women's March with the Youth for March for Our Lives and the Latino March on Washington. We've marched to state capitals, city halls, police stations, congressional offices. We've marched down city streets, across town, on campuses, in protests and parades. Our fat and queer bodies have been a part of every social movement, every fight, every attack on the weak, every community celebration, every birth, every death, every breath. This is the mighty legacy of our beautiful queer and fat bodies and trans bodies. Let us rise tall in our bodies. Let us continue to embrace and collude with intersectional movements, but let us not forget to raise our voices, to call on our allies, to lead our marches and our parades. Let us fight for our youth and protect our elders. Let us proudly carry the weight of our fat and queer and fat and trans legacy. I had another piece, but I really want to go to the Q&A and just kind of talk about, what we're doing here. If you don't mind.
Okay, that's fair. Wonderful.
While Alan's giving everyone the opportunity to unmute themselves, I just want to say I love both of these. I love the way that this pairing worked out too. Hearing poetry with teeth and poetry that is so unapologetically political. I always love that, and I just want to thank both of our poets for that today. And I'm excited to hear what people want to talk about after hearing this work.
Yes.
So,
I do have something to say.
Oh yeah, whenever anybody's ready.
Yeah. Right before we get into the Q&A, I just want to quickly put a plug in there for next week.
Yes.
So next week, Thursday, the 17th, we have Raul Palma and Robin Carstensen, and that will be again at 6:30 p.m. And however you saw to come to this reading, go the same way you'll find the next reading.
And spread the word.
Spread the word. Now, I definitely want to get into the Q&A. I've allowed everyone to unmute themselves, so you can unmute yourself, or if you prefer, you can put a question or a comment in the chat, sorry.
Okay. So I want to ask Sarah a question first. I'm so happy to be with you and see you. But I wanted to ask you, like during this whole shutdown, pandemic, everything, how are you writing? How are you finding like the ability to write?
Oh, firstly, I am so excited to be here with you. And those were beautiful, so beautiful. And I'm really, in many ways, like envious of the way that you can process your vulnerability into actual poetry in what seems like a very, like, not quick, but like it's still the moment, and you're speaking to it. And I feel that I just have such a hard time with that. My writing right now has been just really sporadic and whiny. Like it's been nothing that I would show another human. I think there's maybe like one thing that was really personal to me in the way that COVID specifically hit my family, that I feel like I was maybe getting ready to, I might send it out, but it's a short story. It's like the only way that I can come at these feelings is indirectly, which I would like to be different in that. I would like to be able to come at them more explicitly, but I also wonder if my voice is really the voice that needs to be explicit in about these things now, or if I should move aside in a way. So yeah, that's something I think about a lot and really kind of grapple with. But how are you writing during the...
I don't really know, because I found that I didn't know this, but in my everyday normal life before all this happened,
Yeah.
I would hear bits of conversation from people, and I would put that away and grab pieces here and there. And then when it was ready to be, it was cooking all this time and it was ready to be on paper, I would sit down and write it.
Mm-hmm.
But since we were in lockdown for like 3 months, I wasn't having eavesdropping conversations with coworkers or people in the library. So I was missing an essential part of like, what are people talking about and what are they doing? Because I have this thing that if I'm thinking about it, then other people must be thinking about it too. So I kind of go out and like I test that little theory by eavesdropping on conversations. Mm-hmm. And so then I didn't have that ability. So I just like, everything I wrote was like yours, like personal, but it's like something I wouldn't show people because I just like, I can't verify the truth about what this is. So
Yeah.
But when I wrote my piece this morning, I thought, I'm just like, up to here, I like to have so much in my head about COVID and masks, and just there's 2020, this whole disease is just bringing to life every metaphor that we have, wearing masks and I can't breathe, and everything is just it's taking a physical manifestation. And I just thought I need to put that on paper today. Yeah, but I feel like I'm like, there's so many other people who have such more intense stories about COVID. Like, who am I to talk about this? But I kind of feel that way about farm work too. I'm like, I'm not the kind of farm worker who traveled around the country, so my story probably doesn't matter. But then I realize
that's not true.
Matters. So
Well, and the other thing I think about too, and this was what you were saying too, some of the themes in your in your poem about like fat trans bodies, is that because so many of us have been marginalized in so many different ways, we think that if we're not fitting that particular performance of whatever it is, whether it's queerness or Latinidad or a sort of laborer experience, that maybe our voices don't belong to those parts. But that's why they never get diversified. That's why we never get to see the multitude of identities that are part of this. And so I feel both like I am falling into that trap and continuing the sometimes monolithic understanding we have as a culture, because I fall into the trap, even though intellectually I can sometimes step out enough to see it,
Yeah, the reason I wrote the one about the trans bodies and stuff is because I was really wanting to be out on the streets during the protests for Black Lives Matter, but I'm like, I can't. I'm in my 50s. I can't be out there with people doing those things. Like, and that really like just hurt my activist soul to not be part of that. And so I thought, okay, well, when I was younger, someone stepped aside so that I could step forward and lead. And so now is the time for me to do that and support in any way I can. But watching TV, I saw so many different shapes of bodies and people, their different colors and abilities. And I thought, this is really the first time I've seen a movement that fully encapsulated what our population looks like. And so that's why I have hope about what's happening now, is because it's not just Black people. It's not just, you know, it's everybody. There's so many bodies who generally are placed against each other. We're fighting for the piece of the pie, and this time we're uniting around a cause. So that gives me some hope.
Yeah, for sure. Such good questions.
Yeah, any other questions, please? Just go for it.
I have a question kind of about, Sarah, you mentioned kind of wondering about when to step out of the way or something like that, I think you mentioned. And Miguel, you kind of spoke
I
to
heard
this.
that as like Robot Alan voice.
Oh. Can you hear me now, okay? Am I coming through or no?
Yeah, yes, I can hear you.
Earlier, Sarah, you mentioned...
Oh, now I can hear you. Sorry, Trey, could you repeat that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Earlier, you mentioned something about sort of knowing when to step out of the way, you know, and maybe not say anything. And Miguel, you were talking about this too. And I was wondering if y'all could talk a little bit more about, you know, I don't know, what things in your imaginative lives sort of inspire you to give you the bravery to keep writing and to keep putting yourself out there, even if, you know, I guess it can be a fine line internally with all of us, you know, but I'm just wondering, like, what are the things that keep you going when you are kind of sitting on that fence a little bit?
This is going to sound like...
No, go ahead.
Oh, no, please, Miguel.
I was just going to say that stuff collects in my head, and it has to come out. If it doesn't come out in poetry, it comes out in frustration, or it comes out in passive aggressiveness. So the best way I can channel all these feelings and things that I'm seeing is through poetry. I learned because of ACT UP that I can use anger and all those like kind of negative emotions. I can channel them in a way through protests and things that help and lift people. So, but right now the thing that I try to do is just put it through the lens of either poetry or fiction or what. It always comes to me as a poem first. And then sometimes it needs to be a short story or something, but I have to do it that way. So if it just stays inside of me, I'm just awful to people around me.
It's funny because that's like a sort of version of my answer too, which is that I'm definitely not one of those really disciplined writers. I wish I was one of those disciplined writers. In fact, I don't know if Trey, you also wrote for this, but in the anthology that's in honor of Ted Cruz that's coming out recently, it was reminding me of him saying like, you need to get up every day and like write at 5 a.m. And I was like, dude, like firstly, nothing happens at 5 a.m. Secondly, I mean, I want to be that person, but not only am I not that person, but I feel like it does take me time to process. But if I take too long and I don't write anything, and again, this will sound really emo, but I will get super depressed. I will get to the point where like I can't even feel, like I don't even understand what's wrong until someone will say, well, have you written lately? And I'm like, oh, yeah. I guess like I somehow like overwhelmed myself or talked myself out of this. And so like in terms of like actually just writing, but also I think teaching has helped me really stay in with maybe allowing myself, say, to continue sending out my work, or to believe that my work has a place somewhere, because I look at the diversity of my students, and I'm really privileged that in Washington State, I have like a really diverse with student demographic. And so I'm really seeing like just this like vast array, and I see like how many different things are meaningful to them. And I had a student who is very unlike me in like a million ways. In fact, we had a hard time working together, frankly, but she came up to me at the beginning of the quarter and said, "I hope it's okay, but I stalked you online." And I was like, well, that sounds super creepy. But what she meant was that she read my work, and she didn't know that that's actually what you're supposed to do when you're going to work with somebody. Like if you're a creative writing major, like you should go read their work and find out if you. And so here's this student from like a super privileged background who, you know, like Anglo cisgender Washingtonian, who was telling me like how meaningful like some of the poems were to her, and how she learned something. And I was like, really? Okay. and so that's just sort of like a more recent example, like from the last couple years. But I sort of try to keep that in mind too, that who am I to assume what other people will like and benefit from too. And so like I think about how sad I would be if other writers like stopped writing or stopped trying to publish. And so thinking about being part of that community. But thanks for that question.
It's also
What do you
kind of
do,
hard.
Trey?
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, try to get out of my own way, you know, but I think just find things that I really give a crap about, you know, and so that like it's meaningful for me. And I figure that even if it doesn't do anything, then at least it was useful for me personally, you know.
Yeah.
I find that that's what I do as well, is that I could process and write, and sometimes I overthink and then I lose the moment. But so many things in these last 4 years have just been one right after the other that you don't really have time to process everything. I mean, I still haven't fully processed the Pulse shooting, because right after that we had a series of, again, Black men being killed by police officers. Then we had the horrible election, kids in cages. I mean, it was just boom, 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 boom. So hopefully after November, I can spend 2021 just processing the last 5 years and just mourning everything that happened, and then celebrating the strengths that we have. And hopefully that will be just like an explosion of creativity for a lot of people. I know hard times bring a lot of creativity. I know during the AIDS crisis, so much creativity was happening, even though there was death and dying, and we're now in that place again. So I think there's a lot of creativity happening. It's just in homes, and people haven't been out to share it yet.
Mm-hmm.
So when we get around this virus and this situation, I think there will be a big, like a renaissance of art and culture and creativity and diverse voices. But it's hard to like process every single thing after another. When you're doing that, then you gotta mask up 3 times and sanitize everything. It's just, everything is a process, right? Except the ability to process what you're thinking, yeah, and you're feeling. So yeah.
I agree. Like, and I like what you're saying about like getting to sort of mourn and process, because while people are writing and the publishing industry is all of a sudden like trying to be woke, which is good, but also like, all right, guys, like, way to wake up. That's, I think it's going to be different work. Like, I really love what you're like, yes, like so much, especially like during the AIDS crisis, like the real heart of it, so much, what came after that is so different than what came during it. And both are so important, but couldn't happen if people hadn't even been given just a tiny bit more space to breathe and not be in a constant state of crisis, which, as you know, is what we're in right now.
I think we have time for another question, and that's just time that we'll have to record another question and answer. And then if people want to keep talking, that's fine with me. But yeah, maybe one more question that will be recorded.
I just want to kind of piggyback a little bit on what you have been saying. This is really great. I love the idea of a process and something new kind of coming out of it, from it. And I'm just sort of wondering, because I'm like, you know, there's been there's that tension between sort of more fragmented work and more narrative work. I mean, it's not really a tension, it's sort of a false tension, I guess, but there's sort of directions that people go in that way. And I just wonder, like, to go through the process, for God's sakes, like what is that going to look like, right? Like that is going to linguistically, I mean, that's really interesting. I mean, I don't think there's an answer to that because it's not done yet, but I just wanted to throw that in there because I think that's a really interesting idea of how these things are going to affect language. You know, it's interesting. It's really interesting. I'll take my answer off the air.
Yeah, I wonder like how these tensions and celebrations and mournings are what form they're going to take, and the language that's being used as well. I think a lot of people are becoming aware that grammar can be very colonial, but you kind of also need structure when you're going to write. So it's this fine line of like being able to communicate effectively, but also not being so hung up on commas versus semicolons and stuff like that. So hopefully, there'll be a little more loosening of the form so that way we can get the message across. But I'm really finding that these kind of virtual experiences, I hope they stick around, because I am a really big introvert. So when I have to do a reading, I will put it in my head like 2 weeks before. Okay, I'm going to do a reading. Get your shit together. Like do it. And then if there's any chance that I can cancel out, I will do it. But I really enjoy these virtual experiences because they keep me in touch with people that I know and that I love, and they allow me to share my work. So I hope that there will be a hybrid of, in-person readings, but also that this creativity will still continue, because a lot of readings like this would not have happened maybe, if it wasn't for the ability to link up virtually.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and at first I was really guilty of, like, you're in Twitter and you're like, oh my God, that reading looks great. And I like it. And I put it in my calendar, and then it's in Eastern Standard Time. And I'm like, and I miss it. Or I thought it was Wednesday and it was on Tuesday and I've missed it. Or I'm just like, if I have to spend another 5 minutes in Zoom, I might like gouge my eyes out. But I agree though, because then once I also got I have to get my shit together for the online ones. The in-person ones, I feel very nervous, but also there's like, to me, there's this like responsibility of representation for the audience. Like I think about who would I want someone to show up to my reading? Yes. Like, so I should show up to other people's readings. And I have been known to also guilt people really badly with that exact logic, but is not fair for everyone, right? Because I think like your introversion should be respected, Miguel. Like, do as much as we can do, right? And if I also hope that this platform stays viable and that we do both. I am a little terrified of losing like human contact. Too many people are joking about like, oh good, we don't have to hug anymore. And I'm like, what is wrong with you? Like, you should want to hug people, not strangers. I'm not talking about like, someone you don't know if they wash their hands, but like, I really, miss being around other people. And I do think there's a difference, but this is like a level of accessibility that's been really amazing. I've been at some, especially at Split This Rock, they had more conference panels that happens remotely where, well, many of us were there in person, but because folks either couldn't afford DC or they had ability access issues, we were able to like still hear from them. And though there are so many valuable voices that we miss because of our disabling structures, right? Like the body isn't disabled, the culture disables the body. And so, yeah, I'm very curious. Although I also want to second that the grammar issue is so like, I've had to like rethink how I talk about grammar to explain like it in a non-colonial way, to think about it as breath and spacing. Because otherwise I've got a lot of like really sassy poetry students, which I love, who are like, I don't need to use like colonizers punctuation. And I'm like, where does this thought end? So yeah, I feel like I'm just echoing what you said, Miguel, but it was so perfect that I'm just piggybacking.
Yeah, and I miss the electricity of being in front of an audience and the library. Because when you're reading, they will pick up a phrase and they'll laugh, and you're like, that wasn't meant to be funny, but they're in the mood
Right.
of like, that's funny, and you realize, oh yeah, that is kind of funny. Or sometimes you're reading and then you'll hear somebody and they'll crying, and you're like, oh, shit, I made somebody cry. And just the interaction of introducing somebody and having them come off the stage, and you can like, oh, and this is my friend, and you hug them as I miss that part of the reading. So that's why when I go to AWP, I have to be like, okay, I'm going to go to as many readings as I can, hug as many people as you can, just tough it out for 3 days and like get your ass out there. When you get home, you can be in the basement and do what you do. But this is the time you're going to see all the people that you really want to see. So, so make it happen. But yeah, so hopefully we will have those times again very soon.
Very, very sage. Very, very wise. So, like I said, we can keep talking. I'm going to stop recording, and if you only had this amount of time to come spend with us and you need to go do other things, totally understand. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Before I stop recording, I just want to say very quickly, thank you very much to our readers. Absolutely. And just to remind everyone, next week, the 17th, 6:30, look out for that reading with Raul Palma and Robin Carstensen.